Before we get started, let's give some context. So yeah, the Persona 4 video is coming, but that is a very big game and inevitably going to be a very big video. So might as well plump things up a bit with a video or two so you guys aren't starving. I mean, we do have the new Berserk chapter in a few days, and why not talk about a super relevant movie? Assuming this video comes out before the Berserk chapter, but fuck it, I'm not even trying to follow a schedule anymore. Anyway, it's time to get back to normality.
7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles today, 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. Boots, 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 moving up and down again. Don't look at what's in front of you. Boots, 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 moving up and down again. Men go mad with watching them. There's no discharge in the war.
"28 days later." That's right, it's finally time to talk about a movie I cannot shut up about. I've referenced this tons of times in other videos. Pretty much any point where I brought up Last of Us, this movie gets a name drop. And there's a good reason for it. In terms of influence, this is easily one of the most famous zombie films ever made. From video games to TV, other zombie movies, 28 Days Later has permanently shaped the landscape. Much like George Romero himself, while the King practically invented the idea of a zombie as we know it today, 28 Days Later introduced the idea of running zombies. Okay, that's where I can actually be a bit debated. Technically, there were other zombie films that had faster forms of infected. Return of the Living Dead had them actually be pretty quick and agile since it was poking fun at the public's idea of zombies as almost a direct parody of George Romero films. They name-dropped Night of the Living Dead, established that it happened in real life, and the movie was essentially the director stealing the story and changing details around, to the point it pretty much got every single thing wrong.
I thought you said if we destroyed the brain, it'd die. It worked in the movie! Well, it ain't working now, Frank. You mean the movie line?
We also had City of the Walking Dead that came out in 1980, where the zombies were quicker, but since that was an 80s Italian horror flick, it couldn't break into the mainstream the way that Return of the Living Dead at least attempted to. Instead, 28 Days Later is widely considered the movie that popularized the concept in the genre, even being one of the films responsible for the 2000s zombie boom, when everything and anything had to be about zombies. Despite Danny Boyle not actually considering it a zombie movie, yeah, he was pretty adamant when it first came out that it was not a story about zombies, it was its own thing. The infected aren't just fast because it would be scary, it's because Boyle considered them a completely different entity from a typical zombie, and hoped their speed would be a clear sign that these were something else. Instead of typical hordes moaning and groaning, you had fast, feral infected that could tear through a city in minutes. Ironically, it didn't work, and instead 28 Days Later is considered one of the best zombie films ever made, and Boyle at this point has pretty much accepted that label, though is still, even now, trying to add his own twist to the formula and making it very clear that, yes, it is technically zombies, but these are different. They have their own thing going on. Also, this style of zombie has gotten monumentally popular. Games like Left 4 Dead have outright name-dropped 28 Days Later as a major influence. You also have East Asian zombie media like I Am a Hero, Zom 100, Train to Busan, All of Us Are Dead, Kingdom, all of which use fast zombies that can infect a victim lightning quick, styled off of 28 Days Later. The Dawn of the Dead remake by Zack Snyder also used sprinting zombies, a funny marriage between the shambling corpses like what the original had and the new age high-octane version 28 Days Later introduced, since they were fast, but still needed to be shot in the head to be taken down. Walking Dead even so took influence from the film, with the opening being a near identical recreation of the intro to the movie, with Rick waking up in the hospital and stumbling into a new world overrun by infected hordes. And of course, The Last of Us name-dropped 20 Days Later as a massive influence, taking certain themes and ideas for its plot and world building. You get the idea. 20 Days Later has influenced and will continue to influence scores of zombie media. Such a reputation is honestly pretty funny, considering how quaint the original truly is in the grand scheme of things, being a little indie movie made in the UK for only about $8 million, which is damn near microscopic in terms of film budgets, especially nowadays. But let's stop teasing and just talk about the damn movie already. Before we do that, I'm just gonna get out of the way. Here's a spoiler warning. Yeah, the movie's really famous, and it's especially relevant thanks to recent events in recent years, from the movie being damn near impossible to get legally until 28 years later was fully announced, to 28 years later being announced, being teased, marketed, to finally coming out. But it's one of those where people know about 20 Days Later, but you might not have actually seen it. So this is for those that haven't sat down and watched the movie. Please do so, you will not regret it. I love this damn thing. We're also going to be talking about 28 Weeks Later as well, the sequel, and how it stacks up to the original. We're also going to be talking a little bit about years, but I'm going to be a bit vague on that one for reasons that you'll understand when we get to it. Still, you get the point. Watch this series. 20 Days Later was released in 2002, directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland. It follows a normal man named Jim who wakes up from a coma 28 days after the UK has fallen to a mysterious new disease, only known as Rage. It was unintentionally unleashed on the public after a group of environmentalists released a group of chimpanzees infected by the virus. They thought they were saving the monkeys from unethical experiments and instead became the patient zero to the thing that could end the world. The Rage virus is a fast-acting, highly aggressive contagion that can turn a normal person into a blood-vomiting monster in under 20 seconds. Now, alone in this weird, nightmarish world, Jim must struggle to survive and find a sanctuary away from the infected. That's the basic plot summary, because really, 20 Days Later is a relatively simple movie, all things considered. It follows the basic structure to any zombie story. Main character discovers a pathogen is turning people into hordes of violent monsters, main character builds up a small group of survivors all trying to evade the zombies, and along the way they search for sanctuary, dealing with personality conflicts and trust issues among the group. It's a very safe formula, basically the bedrock to the whole genre, but what makes 20 Days Later different from the rest all comes down to style. The way the film is shot, the way it tells the story, how it handles the zombies, everything about it just feels different. It avoids a lot of typical tropes and cliches that a typical zombie story would follow, bravely and proudly doing its own thing. Which makes sense considering the indie vibe the film has. Danny Boyle at this point was known as an indie director, so he never really vibed with just following the mainstream. Plus, it just couldn't afford to follow the pack, so it had to get creative. With the limited resources they had, they managed to make a film that feels like a large journey. But let's stop speaking in empty words and start explaining some things. The film's intro quickly gets you up to speed on how this all works. The infected originated from a biolab where they were experimenting on monkeys. Once a single test subject was released, the virus spreads like wildfire, jumping through the environmentalists and quickly building a small horde. From there, you know all you really need to. The virus takes mere seconds to fully infect a victim and transform them into a feral monster. Any kind of fluid from the infected is enough to spread the virus. Saliva, blood, sweat, anything that comes in contact with you. So an infection can easily snowball into an entire city or a country falling, which is exactly what happens. The UK, and presumably the rest of the world at this point, completely collapsed with only the infected ruling the streets. This is made clear when Jim wakes up in the hospital. The very beginning of the film after Jim wakes up is this strange dreamlike sequence. He's simply walking through the streets of London, completely empty and desolate. There's not even any corpses or real devastation, it's just empty. Usually zombie stories really push the mass devastation. The Walking Dead, which, like I said earlier, opens on a remake of this scene, has Rick already encounter zombies while still in the hospital. But 20 Days Later is very quiet. You just have this lone man walking around confused, with Godspeed You Black Emperor slowly building as he covers more of the city. It's one of those scenes that sounds boring, but it easily sucks you in as you watch it. All the little hints that something is terribly wrong. The building music, the signs of carnage that are there but extremely subtle, like broken down cars, one bus is just straight up turned over, and a bunch of missing persons posters. This scene was so effective that one of the most famous scares in the film is in this sequence, and I'm not talking about the actual zombies. No. The part where Jim sets off a car alarm ended up scaring the shit out of people when the movie first came out, because the sound design's so quiet and patient, and then suddenly you have a car alarm blaring. Now, it's not just a jolt because loud noise, but because the audience does know what happened. The infected are out there, and a loud car alarm is exactly the thing that would attract a shitload of them. So you jump from the shock of the alarm and feel a sense of dread as you realize Jim just gave away where he was at, and he has no idea. You're on the edge of your seat waiting for an infected to come sprinting towards him, but it doesn't happen. Instead, the movie goes back to being slow and quiet, Jim simply realizing he's completely alone, even shouting for anyone who could still be there. Another source of tension, since the last thing he wants is for somebody to show up. But as far as he's aware, he's the last man on Earth. This is what makes 28 Days Later different from the rest. It plays with your expectations. You know the movie's about zombies, but the movie's very conservative on how much they show you. Yeah, you get your first batch in the cold opening, but after that, it's a pretty long build-up, simply taking in the damage they can cause and how a major city like London is a ghost town. They don't even try to smear the streets in blood or show a bunch of dead bodies in the hospital, it's just nothing. Still, you understand how dangerous they are, and you understand Jim is completely by himself, a guy who has zero clue what's going on and what he just woke up to. He's woefully unprepared to handle even a single infected. He just woke up from a coma, atrophied and malnourished. Now, Jim is played by Cillian Murphy, who's gone on to have a pretty damn successful career in recent years. But this was kind of one of his first big breakout roles. Something I think is well earned because he is fantastic playing Jim, being able to embody this everyman that just has no idea how deep he just found himself in shit. He's instantly relatable and you really do feel for the guy as he's just trying to figure out what the hell is going on here. And a lot of his choices do make sense for just some guy who woke up from a coma one day and everyone's missing. He has no idea what the infected are. He doesn't even know they exist yet. So him stumbling around just screaming out for anyone to help him, yeah, it's dumb because we know what's going on, but he doesn't, so you can't really blame him. Still, Jim ends up going to a local church for help, where the first major red flags make themselves apparent. Once he enters, you see the building is completely desolate. Stuff inside is smashed and there's graffiti on the wall, saying that the end is pretty fucking nigh. Too right, man. Unfortunately, Jim doesn't heed the warning and ends up walking straight into a room full of dead bodies. Piles of corpses in the pews with only a few people walking around, who notice Jim, and they just stare at him with their mouths open. Yeah, this is where shit goes from bad to hell on earth. This is the infected. They attack and they chase him through the streets, sprinting after him as he's desperately begging for anyone to help him, and he's only saved by a duo of survivors that take him to a small shop they turn into their hideout, Selena and Mark, who have been barely scraping by in the city. This is where the story officially kicks off. Jim is introduced to his new world, and it finally sinks in how bad the situation truly is.
I've got some bad news.
Everything is gone. The government, the media, probably even the rest of the planet. Everything is consumed by the infected. All that's left are the stragglers trying to keep their heads down and avoid the hordes as best they can. You can also see the big conflict in the movie starting to brew up here, between people just trying to survive and people trying to live. Jim is new to all this. He doesn't have the survivalist instinct that Selena and Mark do, who have been through hell and back multiple times during the worst of the infection. Instead, he still cares for people and wants to trust others. A risky mindset that they can't tolerate. Selena in particular admitting that she would leave Jim behind or even outright kill him without hesitation if the situation calls for it.
And just so you know where you stand, if it happens to you, I'll do it in a heartbeat.
This conflict is one of the biggest themes of the story, something that is called upon in pretty much every plot point from the beginning when Selena saves Jim to later on when they meet other characters, and then fully the ending. This is where the play-by-play ends, and we'll just talk more in a general sense, mainly about the different ideas the movie brings up in the larger story. Now, I said that the big theme of the story is the difference between survival and actual living. And yes, the movie calls attention to this a lot, especially later on when you meet Frank, because that's kind of his whole deal. Later in the movie, after the trio goes to Jim's house to check on his parents, they suffer an attack by the infected. Mark is wounded and exposed to infected blood. Selena kills him before he turns, and the surviving two try to take shelter in a nearby apartment tower. They run into a group of infected there as well, but are saved by a mysterious man in riot gear. He quickly dispatches the infected, and we discover that the man is named Frank, surviving in his apartment along with his daughter Hannah. Despite the hellscape around them, the two are actually living pretty comfortably, at least as best as they can be, even putting up Christmas decorations to celebrate the holidays. It's a very jarring scene. So much carnage and horror just a few minutes beforehand, and now you see this plucky guy and his daughter offering Jim and Selena tea. Frank embodies someone that doesn't want to just survive, he wants to live, to make sure his daughter is happy and safe, and can actually enjoy what's left in life to enjoy. He even has a plan to escape London. There's a military broadcast promising shelter and security from the infected. Selena doesn't buy it, fully consumed by the survivalist mentality to the point she just assumes they're already dead, but Frank needs the hope. Staying in London is a death sentence. Sure, the infected made the streets safer, but now they're a problem too. So the group all agreed to journey north, towards Manchester where the last military blockade's supposed to be. Really, this is where 28 Days Later reveals that it's, at its core, kind of a road trip movie. Or at the very least, that's what it turns into, because the movie does kind of become different things at different points. So at this point, after they all meet up, you just have this group of strangers growing to trust one another and build up a sort of found family as they go on this road trip. Jim's family is unfortunately dead, his parents committing suicide after the city fell to avoid being killed by the infected, and while you never figure out what actually is Selena's backstory, you can assume any loved ones she had are gone too. A large part of Jim's character is looking for a new family, a new place to belong. In the beginning, when he journeys with Selena and Mark, you see that he has trouble fitting in with them. He's not as sharp and ends up breaking some rules he didn't even know existed simply because he didn't have the foresight that they did, such as lighting a candle so he could see in the dark, not realizing the infected would be attracted by the light, causing them to attack the house, which is actually what gets Mark killed. Despite partially being responsible for the death of her friend, Selena doesn't blame Jim for it, simply seeing it as bad luck and just what happens in this new world. He also isn't as fit as Selena, still weak from his coma and almost being left behind when the infected chased him up the apartment building. Every situation screams that Jim is an outsider. He doesn't belong in this world, and he will die fast if he doesn't figure out what to do and where to go. Selena can only realistically pull him out of so many situations before it just goes wrong or she decides it's not worth the effort. She has to look out for her life too, and Jim's search for a family plays into this. You see it throughout the beginning of the movie. He couldn't find any doctors at the hospital, so he tried going into the city. When London was completely empty, he ended up just wandering to a church, hoping to talk to a priest. Jim's first reaction during a situation like this was just to find an authority figure to help him. He doesn't know what to do and was hoping to find someone who does that can do something. Really, each person Jim runs into sorta ends up teaching him an important lesson. The infected priest taught him of, well, the infected, and how dangerous they are. These things will kill you very quick, and they have no intentions on listening to reason. Selena and Mark are kind of his next teachers, giving him answers and saving his life from infected, even agreeing to walk with him to his house despite thinking it was a stupid fucking idea. He's learning about the state of the world and what it takes to survive. The death of Mark rattles Jim, but he quickly wisens up to what this situation requires. He would have to steel himself and be ready to handle any unpleasant situation that comes up, his first big lesson. Frank essentially serves as the next teacher, teaching him that while survival is important, there has to be more to life than that. You need something to hold on to, some kind of hope, whatever it may be, and that allowing others into your life is not suicide. If anything, it might be the one thing to keep you alive, since Frank's plan relies on having Jim and Selena go with him. If it was just him and Hannah, that's too much risk, since if something happens to Frank, Hannah's screwed. What really pushes this point even further is just, well, Frank himself. Brendan Gleeson plays the guy, and he is a very good actor, able to embody this warm, loving figure that you instantly feel like you could be okay with. Sure, the first time we see him, he's clubbing in the skulls of two infected, but right after that, he's just a nice guy. Now, Naomi Harris plays Selena, and she's meant to kind of be the opposite extreme. While Frank is warm and willing to trust others, Selena is completely consumed by fuck other people, I'm out for me mentality, because that's what's kept her alive for that long. Instantly, you can kind of see the chemistry of this group forming. You have Hannah, who's kind of the naive kid just trying to understand everything that's happening. Frank, who's trying to play essentially just the hopeful guy trying to keep everyone's spirits up and do what he can to keep the group moving. And Selena is the hard-ass survivalist, though you do see Frank's influence is letting her kind of let her guard down. Jim is trying to figure out his role in this group and what he should be doing, since he's still new to everything as well. The four spend a lot of time together, escaping London and into the countryside. There we see that the devastation isn't all that's left. There is still legitimate beauty out there as well. Peaceful fields with animals, sweeping landscapes, and no infected to ruin it. They seem to just kind of stay in the cities. Frank was right. Survival isn't all there is to do. There's even a funny scene where they raid a grocery store, actually able to relax and just get whatever they want. Finally able to take a breath and enjoy the time they have together. Jim would never have been able to have this if he just blindly listened to Selena, staying cooped up in London and sneaking around all the time, focusing on everything that's gone wrong instead of enjoying what they still had. Sure, it would have been smarter to do her way, but what would he still be if he was just hiding and killing? Basically no different from the infected. Now, the road trip isn't without its hiccups. They damn near died in the tunnel trying to get out of the city in the first place after the car suffered a flat tire. A grim reminder that anything could go wrong, and even a small problem can blow up into life and death, sometimes way quicker than you ever thought. And you have the scene where Jim enters a roadside gas station alone, getting jumped by a child infected, that he is forced to beat to death. As much as Jim tries to hide it, this situation gets to him. Another lesson from this brutal world, that even children weren't spared from infection, and sometimes survival means doing things that are truly terrible. The The poor kid had to die, yes, he was infected and at that point was just a feral monster. In a way, Jim was kinda doing him a favor by just killing him there, but he didn't have to feel good about it, and he doesn't. Still, this road trip is exactly what Jim needed. He was terrified of being alone, shown in a nightmare sequence where he was left at the campsite, abandoned. He feels like he finally found his place to belong in, and he does not want to let it go. He has his people with him now, the place where he belongs and is willing to fight for. The scene of him killing the child isn't just there to be fucked up, but to, ironically, show how far Jim has come in his journey. In the beginning, he was passive and terrified, having zero survival skills and just relying on Selena to save him. But now he's reaching a level where he can stand up for himself. This is something I'll talk about later, but another big idea the movie plays with is rage. What it means and whether it truly is a terrible thing. Because there is the mindless violence like the infected, and then there's the righteous fury like we see with Frank, willing to put his life on the line to save others around him. Violence is a human instinct, but we see that it can be used for good, though what qualifies as good can be debated all day long. Unfortunately, the road trip ends in tragedy. The blockade is seemingly abandoned. What's left is an absolute wreck strewn with corpses, the soldiers all apparently dead. Frank, completely defeated, gets angry at a crow pecking at one of the corpses, so he chases the bird away. Then a single drop of blood gets in his eye, and that's enough to infect him. The corpse contained the rage virus, and now Frank has mere seconds before he's one of them too. Now Mark's death got to Jim, his first taste of intimate, grisly violence pretty much ever. Frank's death is worse. The group grew to love the guy, this big happy teddy bear that wanted to take care of them, and now he's doomed to be a feral monster.
Keep away from me!
Dad?
Keep away from me! Keep away from me! Keep away! Away!
Selena is screaming her head off to just kill him. Hannah's completely broken, and Jim has no idea what to do. The absolute worst case scenario happened, and he can't get his head together. Still, he does eventually go to hit Frank with a baseball bat, and instead the poor guy's shot to pieces. Quickly put down by a group of soldiers hiding out in the shrubbery. This is where the end game of the film comes into play, where they finally find the soldiers. The whole road trip was spent trying to find them, and they only came in to save the day just a few seconds too late. You would think. Right from the get-go, something is off about these guys. Yeah, they're armed to the teeth, and that makes sense. I mean, they're soldiers, and the infections, kind of making that a pretty good selling point right now. You'd want to be surrounded by guys with guns that know what they're doing. But something about them doesn't make you feel like they've reached a sanctuary. The leader, a man by the name of Major Henry West, is quick to adopt the surviving three, taking them on a tour of their hideout, a mansion they repurposed as a base. He seems like a guy that's easy to talk to, holding a clear control over his soldiers, and seems to know what to do to handle the infected, creating a perfect kill zone to pick off any uninvited guests that try to puke blood all over the party. But there are signs these guys have their own agenda, confiscating the trio's weapons, with one soldier in particular acting a tad too friendly with Selena. You also see that West has one of his own men captured and chained up, an infected man named Private Mailer. He's keeping the poor bastard alive to essentially experiment on him, see how the infected behave, and if they can starve to death. Now, this is a pretty massive red flag, all things considered, but West is able to explain his thought process pretty well. Yeah, it sucks, but Mailer was essentially already dead, just doomed to run around the backyard and vomit blood until his body finally gave out. They have to live for the future, because there is a future for humanity. If the infected can drop dead from exposure or starvation, all they have to do is outlast them. They just need to know when that happens. But you also see some tension in the group. The soldiers aren't actually comrades, they're barely hanging on themselves. A man by the name of Sergeant Farrell is quick to take jabs at West and his command, knowing something about the situation that he's not saying. We unfortunately find out what he's talking about. There is no answer to infection, not a practical one. Instead, the message was a trap. West put that broadcast out there to attract survivors, ideally, female survivors. They plan on keeping Selena and Hannah as sex slaves. The soldiers have gone insane from the despair of the situation and want to keep the women around as the one thing to keep them going.
I moved us from the blockade, I set the radio broadcasting, and I promised them women.
Devolving into animalistic lust instead of rebuilding society like they promised. West even foreshadows this during the dinner scene, saying that tribalistic violence is basically all of human history anyway, so in a fucked up way of looking things, society has returned to normal, and when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Farrell refuses to have any part of this, so he's captured along with Jim after he tried to save the girls, the two taken to be executed away from the mansion grounds. During their capture, Farrell lays out the truth. The world isn't destroyed. Think about it. how could the infected cross an ocean, a mountain? They couldn't fly a plane or sail a ship. They're still alive. It's not like a Romero movie where the recently dead across the world can just get up and start eating people. The infection started in London, and the infected still play by the rules like everyone else. If they bleed, they die. So the rest of the world simply quarantine the UK.
And right now TVs are playing and planes are flying in the sky and the rest of the world is continuing as fucking normal.
Leaving the island to die while they waited the infection out. This is actually a pretty good twist for multiple reasons. Not just that you find out that the soldiers are crazy either, but discovering that the rest of the world is still perfectly fine builds up this interesting conflict in the story. To the characters, this is hell on earth, a living nightmare that could kill you in seconds. But just across the channel, life is going on just fine. Sure, the world's probably paranoid as all hell the infection could find a way to escape, but nations like America probably think of it all as like a dark joke. The funny part is, in the very beginning of the movie, when Jim is talking with Selena for the first time, she talks about how there were rumors that the infection got out, even reports that it was in New York.
The day before the TV and radio stopped broadcasting, there were reports of infection in Paris and New York.
But if UK is under quarantine, then is that even true? Did they just lock the island down, or is the world destroyed? Farrell just seems like a madman at this point, coping with the situation in his own way and just muttering this over and over and over again to himself. It does seem like such a simple problem to outsiders. Some new disease starts spreading in the UK, so they lock down the island, and yeah, maybe the rest of the average Joe doesn't even know the full extent of the rage virus. They could think it's just something like COVID or bird flu. You get sick and you die. The full horror is only known to those trapped inside, and they don't know what the rest of the world is like. Both sides are blind to each other, and that's horrifying. And it's especially bad for Farrell, who has simple common sense, something long gone in this new world. He's stuck alone realizing this truth he's discovered, that they are on their own when the world could come in and save them, but it's not happening anytime soon. Another interesting detail about the twist is how it subverts the teachings Jim has learned from each encounter. West wasn't the next authority figure he could learn from, at least not in the way he wants. He was a threat himself, a reminder that people can be just as dangerous as the infected. Ironically, Farrell was closer to what he would have wanted, someone who gives him something to cling on to and give him hope for the future. Because really, if Farrell was able to convince the other soldiers of what he discovered, the entire ending would never have happened. They would have realized the infected would die out and eventually someone would come to help them, but they were long consumed by nihilism and convinced that the modern era was in ruins. So fuck it, let it all burn. It's hard to remember the small details when everything else about reality just seems to be up in smoke. Hell, if you really think about it, they don't even really need to wait for the infected to starve. Dehydration is a far faster killer, able to kill an average person in about maybe 3 days. And the infected are sprinting, bleeding, seem to show no sign of actual self-preservation instinct. The little bit we see could actually be the remnants as the first few waves are already dying. The actual lifespan for these things might be insanely short, only able to keep the infection going by having a consistent food supply for the virus. Now that it's running short, since the survivors are dwindling or found their sanctuary, the infected have no way of surviving long term. All they need to do is wait. With this hope now in his heart, Jim is able to escape his execution, using his new survival skills to create a series of traps and ambushes to turn the tables on the soldiers. This is why I brought up earlier that rage itself is an important theme of the movie. Not just because the virus turns people into violent zombies, but because it debates the nature of rage and its purpose for humanity. Is rage inherently a negative? Yeah, we see plenty of ways it can go very, very badly. War, torture, murder, humanity can get very unpleasant when it feels like it. The entire reason the virus was created in the first place was an attempt to cure people with rage addictions and histories of violent behavior.
In order to cure, you must first understand.
People already incapable of controlling themselves and acting like savages. But at the same time, rage is simply a tool. It can be used for any purpose. Sure, a man killing another man for no reason is not great, but a man killing another man to save a loved one is genuinely considered a heroic action. I mean, hell, that was literally the whole introduction for Frank. It still falls under rage, using the human instinct for violence, but the context completely changes our perception of how a situation plays out, and 20 Days Later addresses this multiple times. It's horrifying to see the infected maul people and tear them apart, but we like seeing the characters able to fight them off. It's exciting. Frank's introduction, when Mark and Selena save Jim at the house, and when they save him the first time as well, Jim being able to kill the kid in the gas station. It's not exactly played off like a fucking superhero movie, but the point remains that we like seeing the characters able to fend off the infected. West himself even acknowledges that people are simply violent. The return to normal speech is a very clear example of his mindset.
As far back as I care to remember, people killing people.
Humanity is a violent animal. The rage virus is just revealing our true nature deep down. Society and modern living came about because humanity was able to suppress their desires for violence, but the rage virus let it back out. And now it's back to kill or be killed like the olden days. We had to worry about Grug sleeping with your wife and the saber-toothed tigers taking the cave with the warmest rocks. Hell, his way of comforting Jim after he admits to killing the child was just telling him it was kill or be killed. He wanted to survive, so he had to do it. It's just how life is now. There's nothing to feel about it. Yeah, Jim still feels awful because at the end of the day, he's a normal guy, but it was just an infected. If Jim didn't kill the kid, he could have potentially spread the virus to the rest of the group. To protect the others, he needed to die. This is the unpleasant truth the movie likes to talk about. Rage is just a part of being human. Trying to contain it or get rid of it will never work, and viewing it as just an evil to defeat is naive at best. Rage is an instinct to wield. Hell, in a subtextual way of looking at the story, you can kind of view 28 Days Later as similar to Fight Club, essentially being a story about what happens if you suppress a part of human nature for too long. Modern living requires putting up with a lot of mundane and annoying bullshit. Traffic that takes forever, annoying pricks you have to ignore, calling the cops in case someone goes nuts and tries to kill you. Civilization requires being far more passive than our animal instincts are used to. Humanity's been around for less than a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of the world, so the comforts we're used to come in conflict with the monkey brain that just wants to eat, fuck, and kill. The rage virus just reset our brains back to the basics, pure, unfiltered instincts. The only way to survive is to embrace that aspect of mankind again, though you can be clever about it, which is exactly what Jim does at the end of the film. Instead of tackling the soldiers head-on, which would have been stupid and suicidal, he manages to break them apart, get them running in different areas, such as luring West away from the mansion by using the siren at the blockade, then freeing Mailer to cause some chaos. And there's an interesting moment that happens after he frees him. Mailer and Jim just kind of look at each other. Now, all we've seen of the infected is them being these feral monsters that attack anyone in sight, but Mailer ignores Jim. He clearly sees him, the two are staring right at each other, but Mailer leaves him alone, even though the other soldiers are further inside the mansion. So despite being infected, Mailer spared Jim. Now, it's been made clear more than once, the infected are not just zombies, they're still a living human trapped inside the body. They can die from wounds that could kill a normal person. They even starve to death. And there's a pretty disturbing implication that there is the original person stuck inside, unable to control themselves as they savagely attack their loved ones. The movie is pretty subtle about the idea. You only get a few hints here and there, like the child Jim kills saying "I hate you" before he swings the bat, showing that the infected are actually still capable of speech, or the infected in the church looking at Jim more in confusion before running to attack him. It's even implied the infected that attacked his parents' house were staying around their old homes have some kind of memory of living there, since they were Jim's neighbors, and Mailer shows that there is a kind of memory they operate off of. He recognized Jim as freeing him and went off to get revenge on the soldiers that kept him chained up and suffering. And you never see Mailer directly target Jim at any point during the ending. Granted, it's because Jim was sneaking around and staying out of the way, but Mailer 100% focuses his attention on the soldiers and no one else, not even Selena or Hannah. We don't know if this was an intentional choice he makes or just grabbing the closest uninfected he saw, but it's an interesting idea to ponder. And hell, the sequels actually kind of double down on this idea. Of course, you can't talk about the ending without mentioning that scene, where one of the last surviving soldiers captures Selena with the intention to rape her while he still had time. Jim corners him and savagely beats him to death, bashing his skull against the wall, the floor, and finally crushing his eyes with his thumbs, the poor bastard shrieking like a banshee before just dying. Jim killed the guy so bad, Selena honestly thinks he's an infected for a bit, since that level of savagery has only ever been shown by the mindless hordes. But he's fine.
That was longer than a heartbeat.
The two finally embracing as they realize they can escape. And here's where we can talk about the ending of the film. So 20 Days Later has a few different endings. Kind of. Only one of them was actually made, but the other alternate ending is well known, since the studio was very open that they were sitting on the idea. Now, the theatrical ending is the easiest to find, and is the canon one considering the new trilogy of films coming out. Theatrical has the trio try to escape the mansion in Frank's car, but they're cornered by West. He shoots Jim, and Hannah backs the car up to the small horde of infected Mailer's created. They drag West out, and he's ripped to pieces while the three finally escape, crashing through the gate. After this, we see Jim wake up in a small house. They manage to find shelter deep in the forest and have been working on a signal to catch the attention of a jet flying overhead, something Jim saw earlier in the movie when he escaped being executed, proving that yes, there is a quarantine, the world is not destroyed. We also see the infected are starving to death, left as husks on the ground and barely able to move. It's a hopeful ending, something that matches the themes of hope and holding on to each other in times of despair. And it's fitting that such a grisly story would end in this moment, showing that it wasn't all for nothing. Really, it sort of recontextualizes a lot of what we saw earlier. Now, to take a step back and explain a bit more about the technicals for the movie, 20 Days Later is intentionally very rough. It was only shot at like 480p with essentially cheap camcorders. Remember, this was a relatively low-budget affair. Hell, it's so low-budget that the guy who plays Mailer actually plays a different character as well. One of the soldiers in charge of the barricade to the mansion. The guy who was supposed to actually be Mailer never showed up, so they just had Marvin Campbell play two characters. They're able to mask a lot of the limitations with very frantic, almost schizophrenic editing. Things can get so fast-paced, it's genuinely hard to see what's happening. But that is part of the point. Things are fast-paced, intense, you don't know what's going on, all you know is they're very bad. With the ending, you can kind of see the whole movie as a legitimate nightmare. Everyone knows what a nightmare is like. You always feel uncomfortable, even in the slow parts. Then the scary happens and nothing makes sense. Just a mishmash of images and feelings you just want to stop. Hell, the intro feels very dreamlike. Not just with a very out there soundtrack, I mean, Godspeed You Black Emperor is well known for being very psychedelic, but also just about how nothing about the intro really makes a lot of sense. For as much carnage the infected are capable of unleashing, you don't really see it in the beginning of the movie. It's on purpose, of course, but that's my point. 20 Days Later matches the vibe of a nightmare very well. It also explains some of the more out there parts of the movie, like Mailer choosing not to attack Jim or the infected in the church just staring at him. It's essentially just what Jim remembers what happened. It's an interesting way of looking at the movie, that maybe him dreaming all this is affecting certain details. But it ends with him finally waking up. Finally at peace with his new family. It really wasn't all fucked. They still had each other, and eventually they would outlast the infected. But that's the theatrical ending. The director's cut is a tad more bleak. After Jim is shot, he unfortunately dies from his wound, bleeding out after Selena takes him to a hospital in a desperate bid to save him, dying in a bed, just like how the movie opened. Now, it's not a total downer ending. I mean, Hannah and Selena are still alive, but losing Jim is a major blow, especially since Selena's in love with him. He was the protagonist, the one who started the whole journey in the first place, so it makes sense if they want to end it with, waking up in a bed, dying in a bed, but I don't know. Everything the audience learned was from following Jim. Damn near 95% of scenes followed him. Very little did break off from his perspective. The only times it really happened were the cold opening with the protest group, when Frank sulked by himself for getting infected, and even then Jim was still there, and when Selena and Hannah were separated from him by the soldiers. Beyond that, the movie is about Jim, his new life in this hellscape. Him dying in a hospital bed from a wound given by another human is actually weirdly fitting, but I much prefer the theatrical ending. He still gets his ending, but with that spark of hope that the movie's been insisting has been there the whole time. It's not all fucked.
We're gonna be okay. It's not all fucked.
Now, the other alternate ending is weird. It's a radically different one from either version. When the group reaches the blockade and Frank is infected, they don't kill him. Instead, they knock him out and then go to a research facility that just happened to be up the road for some reason. Taking them to a research lab where it's revealed that there is a way to cure the infection. It requires a full blood transfusion. Jim decides to sacrifice himself to cure Frank, taking on his infection and dying so the others can be together. It's an ass pull and a half. This ending was never actually made and only exists in storyboards, for good reason I'd say, because that's fucking goofy. I'm very thankful they never went with this one because I'm not cool with that for at all. The virus is meant to be this unknowable entity that shakes the world. We know it was an experiment by the scientists at Cambridge, but nothing beyond that. The scientist that's confronted by the protesters doesn't explain anything about it beyond saying it's just rage. Hell, the little bit of detail I gave that's meant to cure people with like rage addiction or mental illness, that was covered in comics that came out after the movie. For the movie just itself, that's all you knew. It's just rage. Saying it can be cured by a blood transfusion feels like a wet fart of an answer. The answer to infection wasn't a literal cure. That was the delusion the group was operating off of to give them a semblance of hope. The answer was that humanity would live on. It could keep going in the face of what they believed was Armageddon. They would still live, not just survive. Plus, the blood transfusion is just dumb from a practical sense. It's essentially just trading infections, so no one's actually cured. And I mean, the virus spreads like a wildfire, so doubt you'd be able to strap enough infected down for the procedure for it to have any real effect, at least not without it going horribly wrong very fast. Now, the soldiers themselves just being stuck in the situation with no answer works leagues better. Especially since the ending kind of feels like a tribute to Apocalypse Now. I mean, obviously West isn't as fleshed out as Kurt's, but you do kind of get that vibe. Especially with the ending when, Jim has to go full gorilla to go after them. I don't know. It felt a little Apocalypse Now to me. Still, that's 28 Days Later. It is an amazing movie, and there's a lot more to this franchise out there. You have the various comic books that cover the events both before and after the movie, even explaining more of the origins of the Rage virus and what the intentions of the project truly were, starting off as an attempt to heal the mentally ill, and eventually evolving into a bioweapon, something intended to be sold to the highest bidder, which is an exceptionally stupid idea. In a way, those dumbass protesters kind of saved the world. Sure, the UK fell, but if the virus was unleashed anywhere but the UK, the entire planet was at risk of falling. Just imagine this virus kicking off somewhere like Miami or New York. That would have been apocalyptic, a true extinction-level event. They also do confirm that the rumors that Selena talked about in the beginning of the movie, of it being in both mainland Europe and America, that was bullshit. It was propaganda purely to keep people on the island so they don't try to escape. I mean, the movie itself also does confirm that the rumors were bullshit since the rest of the world is fine, but, the comics explain more about how that actual plot point works. Now, you also have the actual sequels, which we'll talk a little bit about. So 5 years after the original film's release in 2007, 28 weeks later released, expanding on the original movie and showcasing an attempt to repopulate the UK after the virus is seemingly wiped out. Now, 28 Days Later is the small-budget, intimate little horror film, part of the wave of UK indie movies that were popular around the late 90s to early 2000s, since stuff like Trainspotting and Dead Man's Shoes were also part of this wave. And funny enough, Trainspotting was essentially what allowed 28 Days Later to be made, since it was also directed by Danny Boyle. But Weeks Later is a far higher budget affair, having double the money of the original in a far larger scale. The film focuses on a single family, the Harrises. Dawn, his wife Alice, and their children, Tammy and Andy. The intro shows Dawn and Alice hiding out with a group of survivors that are taking shelter in a cottage far away from London. Unfortunately, their shelter is sniffed out by infected. During the chaos, Dawn is forced to abandon his wife, and he's chased by a horde, seemingly leaving her to die. Months later, after the infected seemingly all starve to death, NATO begins an operation to clean up the damage from the rage virus, even bring in refugees to repopulate. Dawn's children are a part of this operation since they were out of the country when the outbreak began, and the children finally reunite with their father and settle into their new lives in the safe zone. Dawn himself actually appointed to the position of civilian caretaker since he was one of the few survivors still in the country when they got there. Still, the kids want to go and sneak back to their old home, despite the area still containing remnants of infected. They manage to get back to their house, and they actually find their mother still alive and uninfected. She's okay, despite their father telling them she was dead. The children and their mother are retrieved by the military, and it's discovered Alice has become an asymptomatic carrier for the rage virus. She's still contagious, but she doesn't show any symptoms and has not turned. Deciding to quarantine her, Alice is kept under strict observation, since this has never happened before with the virus. Dawn manages to sneak into the facility holding her and is infected after kissing her, turning and going on a rampage around the facility, creating a new horde, and all hell breaks loose. And it happens fast, quickly turning the situation into a massive shit show the military can barely contain. That's the setup for the movie, and right from the get-go, there's some major differences between it and the original. All the teasing from 28 Days is gone. It knows that you know about the infected, and they're not shy about showing them. Showing a horde of infected just steamroll through this cottage, infecting and killing everything in sight. It's a great sequence, widely considered the peak of the film. And yes, the implications of that statement matter. The intro is incredible. This intense chase sequence as Dawn is desperately trying to evade the infected as he's losing friends left and right, paired up with that classic In the House and a heartbeat theme that closed out the original movie. Even people that despise this one agree the intro is some of the best material for a zombie movie out there. And yes, there's a reason this movie is despised. 28 Days Later is a very tightly written movie. It's got its ideas and it sees through them to the end. You don't get a lot of answers, but it doesn't ever really intend on giving them. The movie is about Jim and his journey, not about discovering the truth of the rage virus. That's why the alternate ending with a blood transfusion is goofy. Weeks giving more answers and concepts isn't inherently a bad idea. Introducing asymptomatic carriers that can still infect people is really cool. It plays into the body horror that these are still living people, just infected with a nightmare contagion. Really, the asymptomatic carriers just make the whole thing leagues more tragic. Alice didn't even realize she was contagious, and she's forced to watch in horror as her husband turns, unable to move, as he mauls her. The problem is when you sit back and really think about what got us here. You see, the movie tends to just kind of ignore a lot of reality to get characters to certain points, like the kids just being able to escape from a military quarantine. That's a pretty big stretch by itself, but I mean, okay, it's not irredeemable, it's just a tad convenient. You know, they are kids, they're gonna have some level of plot armor, they are the protagonists, they are meant to do something spectacular. I get it. But Dawn, a total civilian being able to slip into the heavily guarded facility to see his wife, who is under extreme guard due to her technically being an infected? Yeah, at that point, go fuck yourself. It's not like Dawn's some big wig with NATO. Yeah, he was the caretaker for the zone, but the military still very much kept their boundaries for where he was allowed to go. He was not military personnel. Essentially, he had full access until he didn't. So him just being able to go see Alice that's getting a tad goofy. Still, it's a single infected and a base full of military guys training to kill them, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Sure, Tammy and Andy will be fucked up from losing both their parents, especially when they just learn their mom's still alive, but at least that'll be the end of it. Why the fuck is no one reacting to this? Yeah, Dawn's just able to walk around and infect people. The very clearly turned man that is smeared in blood and growling, and not a single alert is raised or anyone tries to shoot him. Reminder, the infected are still human. A few bullets in his chest are more than enough to cut this early, but nothing of the sort happens. He's just able to move and infect as he sees fit. So yeah, the script very much ignores reality when it comes time to set up a cool moment. And in all fairness, 20 Weeks Later actually has a lot of cool moments, despite how goofy the movie can get. There is a lot to appreciate here. There's more than a few sequences that genuinely kick ass, even after it starts dipping into some pretty clear stupidity. The scene where Dawn infects the safe room full of people is actually really intense. It fully emulates that fucked up nightmare vibe the original had. It's hard to tell what's happening visually, but hearing the infected roars slowly overtaking the terrified screaming is, not gonna lie, kind of incredible. The scene where the infected take the streets with the military barely able to tell the difference between the infected and scared civilians is another great sequence. The going to hell part of the movie is actually awesome. Genuinely love this part. The problem was to get there required a lot of just kinda stupid shit. Still, if you turn your brain off, it's fun as hell just to watch fast-paced zombie chaos, and the movie is genuinely creative for a lot of its ideas, such as doubling down on the implications that the infected are somewhat sentient by showing Dawn just outright stalk his children. He's pursuing them through the whole movie once he's infected, driven by some hidden desire or instinct to kill them as well, since he doesn't seem to have any intention on infecting them. He wants to kill them. He fucked Alice up. Granted, that is the main instinct of every infected, technically. They maul their victims, and the spreading of the virus is more like an unintended consequence. But Dawn goes out of his way to kill his victims, beating them to death in grisly ways. Hell, the scene where he kills Alice is meant to be a shot-for-shot tribute to when Jim kills the final soldier at the end of the original. Kind of a weird place to do it, considering you usually save the gross-out death for the asshole who deserves it, but you can see it as kind of a subversion on the idea that it's meant to be fucked up and uncomfortable. And really, from there, the movie just kind of starts meandering, focusing on the children trying to escape the UK now that the quarantine's fallen apart. The group slowly picked off one by one as they journey towards rescue. Now, despite my gripes, I don't fully hate 28 Weeks Later. It has a lot of stuff I think is just kind of fucking stupid in it, but it's also easy to forget those problems when it gets to a scene that's actually really cool. Yeah, Dawn able to just walk around and infect a bunch of soldiers with no issues. That's stupid. But then you get the street scene, or the helicopter blender scene, the scene with the nerve gas. There is a lot that is able to balance out the dumb shit. So instead of being a masterpiece like the first movie, Weeks Later is more like a flawed gem. It's still pretty good, and leagues better than some of the other dumb shit the zombie genre has, but it's just not as good as the all-time greats. It's just fun. And of course, we gotta talk about the ending. You know, the ending where it's implied that the infection has escaped Europe and has gotten to the mainland. That's kind of a big fucking deal, since there's a pretty big implication that once it does that, the world is over and dead. And it's a very clear, obvious tease for a sequel, which is what they've been intending to do for a while. But despite being all around pretty good and actually making more than its money back, the 28 franchise went quiet after Weeks. And when I say that it made its money back, it was able to turn $15 million into $65 million. This absolutely was not a flop. Divide among fans, yes. I mean, hell, I actually remember hating this movie a lot more than I did on a recent rewatch. But still, this didn't fail by any definition. People still reference scenes of Weeks Later to this day, even before Years was announced. Now, a big reason why some sequences in Weeks Later hold up probably has to do with Danny Boyle's directing. He genuinely loves the franchise and basically treats it like his baby. So even though Weeks was technically directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, multiple scenes were directly handled by Boyle, which might be why the movie can go from genuinely kick-ass to just kind of okay, because Juan Carlos doesn't really have anything spectacular to his name. I mean, I'm not hating on the guy, but check out some of his credits. Regardless, the franchise went dead. It was still beloved, still referenced, and still influenced franchises even deep in the 2010s. Hell, people were saying that an episode of High School of the Dead actually played a remixed version of In the House in a Heartbeat. So yeah, it still very much had its claws all over the place. But the actual 28 franchise hit a snag. A third film was actually announced not long after Weeks released. As stated, it did very well for an R-rated zombie horror film, but development hell hit, and it hit hard. For a solid 12 years, all signs of progress were dead and buried. Just one of those things where it should have worked out, but just didn't. Even if Weeks was just kind of meh in kind of more than a few parts, The momentum for the franchise was still there. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland saw it too, having multiple conversations through the years about coming back to the series. And come 2023, it was officially announced. 28 years later. Not just a new sequel, but the start of a new trilogy of movies, exploring the effects the rage virus had on the world now a damn near 30 years post the original outbreak. And at the time of this video, it has released. It's out, you can watch it. I did see it, but I'm going to hold off talking about a lot of the specifics for now. The most I'll say is, I liked it, but it definitely feels like the start of a trilogy. There's a lot of setups for ideas that later movies will expand on. The ending, especially, is a massive cliffhanger that will divide people. I'm already seeing a ton of posts by people saying exactly that the ending was fucking stupid in their eyes and they checked the fuck out at it. It especially doesn't help that the movie is almost entirely build-up. It's just building up different ideas and concepts and kind of having to drop those to go talk about others that they also want to build up. So by the end, you don't get a lot of answers or really feel like the journey's over by any means. It's intentional, but it's frustrating. And knowing that you have to wait for the other two movies, that kind of doesn't make it any better. Especially considering the fact that the third one's going to hinge on whether or not Bone Temple does well, which is the second movie that's supposed to be out in just a few months. Now, for the actual concepts themselves, I do like a lot of what they put forward, such as making the infected a lot more like primal, almost cavemen-like savages. Multiple points I kept thinking to myself, this is a lot like The Forest or even outright The Descent, where now the infected are kind of more of a side species to mankind than just being people infected. It also fully dedicates to the fact that a full 28 years had passed since the original. Society and culture itself has fundamentally changed, to a degree where it can almost feel like a fantasy movie, that this in no way is like reality. So whenever it actually does reference that this is still taking place on planet Earth in the middle of the UK, it can be jarring. It's intentionally jarring, but still jarring. So really, my thoughts on Years are, it's good, but it's gonna depend on the other two movies coming out. This is the start of a new trilogy, and it in every single way feels almost like the opening chapters to a book. So if the rest of the trilogy sucks, that's gonna bring this down a lot, because then a lot of the ideas it brought up are gonna feel like wasted time, missed potential. It's just gonna feel like, what was even the point of this? Still, at the very least, right now, I will definitely say it's way better than Weeks. It feels more consistent than that movie, and I like a lot of the concepts in it. Years will very obviously get its own video once it's kind of said and done, but, want to give people time to sit down and watch it. I'm gonna just speak in vagues right here. I mean, it literally just came out. You gotta give it time to breathe and spread. At the very least, the movie is willing to get weird. It's willing to just show you these concepts and ideas and basically say, if you're not on board, you're not on board. Even the soundtrack, it's very out there and psychedelic, much like a lot of the music in the original film. It's one of the highlights to me personally. A lot of the music was done by a band called The Young Fathers, which I never heard of them before, but they made pretty good music for this. So at the moment, Years is just kind of in the wait and see territory. Parts I really liked, mixed with some stuff where I'm like, okay, I gotta see where this goes. But, yeah, all in all, I'm excited to see the franchise come back. It's a fantastic zombie series, and the original is an amazing time you will not regret watching. It's intense, it's disturbing, it's weirdly heartfelt more than once, but most of all, it's memorable. Please sit down and give this franchise a chance. You won't be disappointed, at least with the original movie. And some of the comics, those can actually get kind of dope. But do you know what else won't disappoint you? Gamer subs, use code TAL at checkout. Use the code. Use the code, it'll protect you. Use the code, it protects you. It's summer, the season of warm sunshine and gamer subs. Use the code. Use the code. Use the code or a dark-skinned tomboy will never save you from a horde of feral zombies. Use the code! Anyway, that's all I have to say about 28 Days Later, and 28 Weeks Later, and a little bit of 28 Years Later. You get the idea. The 28 franchise. See you guys. Hey, loser. Do you want a shirt? Do you want a t-shirt? I have shirts now. Look in the description for a link to a t-shirt you can buy. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll kill your family. If you don't buy the t-shirt, I'll poison your dog. If you don't buy the t-shirt, you're going to be the only person in town that does not have a t-shirt. Everyone's going to look at you funny. There's going to be social consequences to not having one of these t-shirts. I am now making express threats of violence against you if you do not buy my t-shirt. I will call the police, tell them how you're not buying my shirt. They're going to plant crack in your house, and they're going to arrest you and then beat you up in a jail cell. Buy my shirt.
We're slogging over Africa. Foot, slogging over Africa. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles today. 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Don't look at what's in front of you. Boots, moving up and down again. Men go mad with watching them. There's no discharge in the war. Count the bullets in the bandoliers. If your eyes drop, they will get atop of you. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. We can stick out hunger, thirst, and weariness, but not the chronic sight of them. Boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Tain't so bad by day because of company, but night brings long strings of 40,000 million boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. I have marched 6 weeks in hell and certify it is not fire, devil, dark, or anything but boots, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Try to think of something different. Oh, my God, keep me from going lunatic. Boots.